In today's video, I'm going to tell you about the GC Loader PNP and how I built the ultimate Nintendo GameCube, so let's get into it. So what is the GC Loader PNP and how did I take that device to make the ultimate GameCube? The GC Loader PNP is a small circuit board with an SD card that you can install inside your GameCube to replace your disk drive, and it allows you to run GameCube games on the original hardware through an SD card instead of having to use the disk drive. Now you can buy the GC Loader PNP from Black Dog Technologies, and I will leave a link to their website in the description down below, and it's going to cost you about 90 bucks, and you may be saying to yourself, that's a lot of money, and it is, but I promise you it's worth it, especially if you play the GameCube a lot or if you collect for the GameCube. It is totally worth it, and I'll get into why here in just a little bit. So how do you install the GC Loader PNP, and what sort of tools or materials are you going to need? Well, first and foremost, you will of course need a GameCube, and it does not matter if it's the DOL001 or the DOL101 model, it will work with either model. Now outside of the GameCube, of course, you're going to need the GC Loader itself. You're also going to need one of these security bit screwdrivers, which you can get a set on Amazon for about 8 or 9 bucks. I'll leave a link to that in the description down below as well, but you're going to need this to get the 4 screws out of the bottom of the GameCube. You can't use a standard Phillips head or flathead screwdriver. In addition to that, you're going to need some kind of small screwdriver kit. I got this on Amazon for about 13 bucks, I want to say, and it has everything that I need to take the GameCube apart. So I'll leave a link to that in the description down below as well. But if you don't have this kit, if you just have a bunch of different size small screwdrivers laying around, that will probably work as well. And I highly recommend having a can of electronic duster handy while you're taking apart your GameCube, because while you have your GameCube apart, you might as well take the time to clean it using some electronic duster to get a lot of the dust out of the inside of your GameCube. Now, I'm not going to go over every little step of how to install the GC Loader. I'm just going to give you kind of a broad overview, because there's much better videos that explain how to install it than I could ever do, and I'll leave a link to some of those in the description down below as well. But essentially, all you have to do is take this handy dandy little QR code that they include with the GC Loader, scan that with your camera, and it shows you exactly how to take your GameCube apart, in what steps, shows you what screws to take out and in what order, and it's a really easy process. You just got to follow the instructions and then make sure you put it back together the same way that you took it apart. It's really not that bad at all. It took me about, I want to say, 30 to 45 minutes to do the entire process, and the beautiful thing about it is there's no soldering required. The GC Loader PNP just plugs in right where your disk drive plugged in using the same port, which is why it's called PNP, because PNP stands for plug and play. So it is extremely easy to install, even for somebody that doesn't know anything about electronics like myself, and I don't know anything about soldering. I was able to install it because you don't need to know anything about soldering, and that is a beautiful thing, which makes it a lot easier to mod your GameCube if you're an everyday electronics user like I am. Now, you will also of course need a SD card, and you can buy a standard size SD card or you can buy a micro size SD card, because the SD card slot on the GC Loader PNP is standard size, but of course you can get adapters for the micro SD cards. As a matter of fact, most of the time when you buy one, it comes with an adapter. Now, I bought a Sandisk Ultra micro SD card, and I bought a 400 gigabyte card. Obviously, the more space you have on the card, the more GameCube games that you can fit on the card. But even with 400 gigs, I can't fit my entire collection on the card, but I can get the games that I want on there. And the beautiful thing about it is it's really easy to remove and add games to the card as needed. So even if I fill it up, if I need to switch some games out, it's as easy as putting it in my computer and dragging and drop, which we'll get more into in just a little bit. Now, you don't have to have a 400 gig micro SD card. The one I bought was about 50 bucks. You could definitely get a smaller one. You're just not going to be able to fit as many GameCube games. But if you have a smaller collection, then by all means, buy a smaller SD card to save yourself some money. Just a recap, the must-haves are the GameCube itself, the security bit screwdriver, a screwdriver kit, the GC Loader PNP, and a micro SD card. And then I highly recommend having some electronic duster handy while you take your GameCube apart. And like I said, it was really easy to take apart. It was really easy to install the GC Loader PNP, no soldering required, and it was really easy to put the GameCube back together. Now, what about loading the software onto the card itself? Because you can't run the games without some kind of software. You got to have a software interface for that. Well, that's easy as well. The software is called Swiss, and you just go to the website, you download the newest version, you extract it to a folder on your computer, and you move the proper file from the folder to your SD card, to the root of your SD card, and then you change the name to boot. And that's pretty much it. I highly recommend watching a more detailed instructional video, which I'll leave a link to in the description down below as well. But it's that easy. You just drag and drop. And then of course you want to update the firmware for the GC Loader as well. That is also a very easy process, and there's plenty of videos out there showing you how to do that. And then you can just create folders on the root of your SD card to organize your games. Like I have mine in a folder called GC_games, and then I have alphabetical folders within there to alphabetize all of my games to make them easier to find. But I had no issues whatsoever installing the software or updating the firmware on the GC Loader. Very simple to do, and that's another thing that I love about this product. Now, as far as where you get the games, I'm not going to tell you where to go online to find GameCube games. If you search hard enough, you can find them, but legally you can only download ISO files for GameCube games that you actually own. So for me, I own a complete North American set, so I'm legally able to download and utilize any North American GameCube game that I want, since I actually do own the games. I'm not encouraging anybody to go out there and pirate games. Again, I'm not going to tell you where to find them. If you search hard enough, you'll figure it out. But again, just make sure that you're only downloading games that you actually own. And like I said, all you got to do is just drag and drop the games onto your SD card. It's that simple. And then you pop your SD card back into the GC Loader, turn your GameCube on, and you're good to go. You just navigate to where the games are, and you press A, and you load into the game, and boom. Now here's the beautiful thing about it. This is not emulation. At first I thought it was going to be emulation, but it's not. This device is simply replacing your disk drive. That's all it's doing. And then running your GameCube games off of an SD card. It's not emulating them. It's still using the original hardware. And because it's running them off of an SD card and not a disk being read through a disk drive, the load times are faster. The games actually look a little bit better, I think. And I think they run a little bit better because you're not having to deal with reading them off of a actual physical disc. So that's another one of the big benefits. But of course, another benefit is if you want to take your GameCube somewhere, you got all the games you need in your GameCube on the SD card, so you don't have to haul a bunch of games with you. So it makes your GameCube a lot more portable, which is another fantastic thing. And you can still save your games using any GameCube memory card. That's still functional. But there is another way you can save your games without having to use a GameCube memory card, and that is to buy one of these little puppies right here. This is called an SDGecko, and this is essentially, it looks just like a GameCube memory card, except it has an SD card slot on it for you to pop an SD card into. So you pop that into your memory card slot, and then you have to, there's some configuration you have to do, which I'm not going to get into in this video. I'll leave a link in the description down below for a video that explains that. But once you get it configured, you can save your GameCube games onto an SD card, which I cannot begin to tell you how fantastic that is, especially if you play a lot of GameCube games, because GameCube memory cards fill up really quick when you play a lot of GameCube games. So being able to save them onto an SD card is amazing. And I bought a what did I buy? I bought a 128 gigabyte micro SD card. Now the reason I bought one that large is because you can also download emulators to use on the GC Loader, but you can't put the emulators on the same SD card that's in the GC Loader. You have to do it in an SDGecko and put your ROMs on the SDGecko as well. But so far I'm able to get an NES emulator, a Super Nintendo emulator, and a Game Boy Advance emulator. Now I will say I'm having a hard time getting the NES and SNES emulator to work. It boots up, but it can't find the ROMs for some reason, so I'm still trying to work through that. But the Game Boy Advance emulator works great. Some games run don't run too good, I've noticed, but most of the games I've tried to play actually run really well. So you can actually play emulators on your GameCube if that's something that you're interested in. For me, this was a must purchase. Now, if you don't play a lot of GameCube games and you have a shitload of GameCube memory cards laying around, then you may not need to invest in one of these. Now, the SDGecko is not very expensive. It's only about 10 bucks. You can get it on Amazon. And then I bought a 128 gig micro SD card, which is not that expensive, but you don't have to get one that big. You could get a 32 gig or a 64 gig and you would be perfectly fine. But for me personally, it is amazing to be able to save all of my GameCube games on a micro SD card. So far what we've talked about allows you to essentially turn your GameCube into more like a modern console, right? Now, if you want to make it even more modern, then you could buy yourself a Wavebird and get yourself a wireless controller for the GameCube with the Wavebird, which makes it feel even more like a modern console. In addition to that, you could get yourself an HD upscaler like the one that I have, the Carby from Insurrection Industries. This HD upscaler is $80 and you can get it through Insurrection Industries website, which I'll leave a link to in the description down below. But again, you have to have the DOL001 model of the GameCube because you have to have that digital AV port. That's what this plugs into, and then your HD cable plugs into there, and it upscales all of your GameCube games to 480i, I believe. Some of them might hit 480p if you're lucky. By buying those two things, it allows you to turn your GameCube into a more modern console, or make it feel like a more modern console, which is awesome. Now, one downside to the GC Loader is that there's a giant gaping hole in your GameCube where the disk drive used to be, and you have to reach down into that hole to pull the SD card out if you want to load more games on it or update it, things of that nature. You have to reach in there and actually pull it out.
That's what she said.
And that giant gaping hole allows more dust to get into your GameCube, which you don't want. So another optional purchase is the SD card mount for the GC Loader from LaserBear, which is a 3D printed mount that you can put your SD card into, and it not only does it fill in the hole that takes the place of your disk drive, it plugs into the GC Loader, plugs into the SD card slot, and it's like a little SD card extender that comes up into the 3D printed shell, which fills in the hole on your GameCube, and it allows you to pop your SD card in and out with ease, and also reduce the amount of dust that's going to get into your GameCube. Now, you can buy this on LaserBear's website, which I'll leave a link to in the description down below, and you can get different colors. It's $25 if you want to get one brand new for the color of your choice, but you can also buy a flawed one for $12.50, and it still works. It will still install. It just might have a small flaw from the 3D printing, like maybe a color issue or the dimensions aren't quite right, but they do say that it will still work and it will still install just fine. So if you want to go that route, you can save yourself a little bit of money. But again, this is not a must-have purchase. You don't have to have this to use the GC Loader. It just makes your SD card a lot easier to get to. It makes the GameCube look better because it fills that gaping hole in the center of the GameCube where your disk drive used to be. So far, I absolutely love the GC Loader PNP. It has absolutely transformed my GameCube into an even more awesome machine than it already is, and it has added so many conveniences because there's a lot of really cool options within the software, within the Swift software as well, that you can take advantage of. But one thing to keep in mind is that in order to save those options, you have to have an SDGecko with an SD card in the SDGecko. So just keep that in mind. Otherwise, you'll have to set those options every time you turn on your GameCube, which is a little bit of a pain in the ass. But there's a lot of options, like the ability to exit a game and go back out to the main menu so that you can select another game, the ability to force a game into progressive scan, the ability to force a game into a certain resolution. There's just a lot of cool options there to play around with, which makes the product and the software even more impressive. But yeah, I absolutely love it. I've had a great experience so far, and for somebody that does a lot of videos on GameCube games, it has made it so much easier for me to capture footage for my videos, and it's also made it a lot more convenient for me to play my GameCube games, and I don't have to pull my games off the shelf and take a chance of damaging them, damaging the cases, because I want to keep my games as pristine as possible. And not to mention, I do have some games in my collection where the discs either don't work or they don't work very well. So it's nice to be able to have an alternative option so that I can still play those games where the discs maybe don't work too well and I haven't had a chance to replace them with a working disc. I highly recommend the GC Loader PNP for all of you GameCube enthusiasts out there, or maybe somebody with a little bit of money that's interested in getting into the GameCube. But again, I do have to say, make sure you're not downloading games unless you actually own them. I have to tell you that. I'm sure you understand what I'm saying. But this is a total game changer for me. It really is. I love the GameCube, and I also love convenience. And this has created a whole new world of convenience for me, not only in my ability to play GameCube games, but also for my YouTube channel. So there you have it, folks. This is my video on the GC Loader PNP and how I used it to build the ultimate badass GameCube. I want to know in the comments down below if you've ever heard of the GC Loader PNP, or maybe this is your first time hearing about it. Also, let me know in the comments down below if you actually have one and use one and what your experience has been. And I absolutely love it. Such a great product. And even though it requires a little bit of money to get everything you need to do the installation and get everything put together, and even add some extras to it, I think it's totally worth it, especially for somebody like me that plays a hell of a lot of GameCube games. But if you enjoyed this video, please be sure and hit that like button. And if you're new here, consider subscribing so that you can join the Retro Wolf family. And as always, folks, stay safe out there, keep playing games and having a good time, and I'll see you all in the next video. Later.